Okay. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Adventure. I like adventure. Educational adventure.
This is the regular meeting of the TCL&P Power Board, January 13th, 2026. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Jennifer.
Tobin,
Here.
Brennan,
Here.
Ness,
Here.
Taylor,
Here.
Bomer,
Here.
Davila, here, Heiberger.
Here.
Perfect. Any disclosure of recusal tonight from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll come back to the consent calendar. You want to,
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one board motion without discussion. Any member of the board staff or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If an item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single board action adopting the consent calendar.
thank you very much. Would any members of the board like to pull anything from consent tonight?
Nope.
All right. Would any member of the public like to pull anything from consent? Okay, bring it back to the board for a motion.
Motion to approve the consent calendar?
Second.
Thank you both. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of passing consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, consent passes. No unfinished business, so we're on to new business item A, which is the fiscal year end audit.
I'd like to welcome Doug Vredevel. He's the partner from Vredevel Hafner who performed the audit this year. And so, Doug, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, welcome, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for having us and for having us do the audit this year. The audit went very well. We come up a couple times throughout the course of the audit process, first to count inventory and do some preliminary work, and the second time when we come up to do the main audit, when we go over all the financial records and details and make sure everything is materially correct. And that is all done to form an opinion on the financial statements. I don't know if you have it in front of you, but it's on page 1 of the financial statements. And that is the page that's on our letterhead, right in the second paragraph from the top. It says, in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the Light and Power. So that's a good, clean opinion. And this opinion only covers the Light and Power, which is a component unit of the city of Traverse City. Pages 3 through 6 in the statements are management discussion and analysis. It kind of gives some nice overview of the audited statements, and if you look on page 5, there's a little bit of detailed information about what changed with revenues and expenses. The electric fund's operating expenses were under your budget, but the purchase power costs came in over budget due to some significant maintenance and repairs at the Kalkaska station. So nothing to be worried or concerned about, just informational. So I won't make you page through the whole statement. There were no significant changes from what Carla reported to you very near your year end. So we didn't find any significant adjustments or anything like that. Just by way of broad overview highlights, you can see your Light and Power revenues and expenses. Each year the revenues exceed the expenses just slightly. It's all carefully monitored and budgeted. 2023, you can see there was just a little bit higher expenses than revenues there. This year, in 2025, the revenues were higher than the expenses by $2.9 million. In 24, it was higher by $3.9 million. So that goes into your net position. This is a little picture of where your operating expenses are, and you can see 59% of them are in your purchased power, 13% in your distribution, and 10% is your depreciating assets. I compared this to last year's pie chart, and last year it was 58% was purchased power, 13% was distribution, 11% was depreciation, so very, very similar and consistent with the previous year as well. And this, you can see is your expenses, your different areas of expenses. Again, you can see the purchase power this year, the very high bar, which is the vast majority of your expenses, is up substantially from last year due to what we mentioned. And this is the change in your net position, which I mentioned was 3.9 and 2.9 million. And you can see it's just down $1 million from what it was previously. It's good to see positive amounts after 22 and 23, which were very minimal and negative. So getting back into a positive net position, or increase in net position, I should say. This is your total net position. You can see the majority of your net position, which is your assets less your liabilities, is tied up in capital assets. This year it's a little over 70 million. And that blue bar, the high bar, that goes up as you purchase new capital assets, and it goes down as the capital assets depreciate. So this tells me that you're investing more than what's depreciating every year. So that's good to see that consistency. And this is a comparison of your utility sales or your revenue compared to the purchase power cost. And you can see those two lines follow each other very closely each year. So the charges are based on the cost of the power that's purchased. And this is just a picture of your OPEB and pension liabilities. You can see that line fluctuates a little bit crazy over the years. In 2023, there was a market loss, so the net pension liability jumped up, and now it's coming back down steadily over the last couple of years. The OPEB, the bottom blue line there, is actually, it looks like it's negative, which is actually good because that means your assets exceed your liability. So you're actually in a positive position on the OPEB plan, a net pension or a net OPEB asset, which is pretty unusual to see. So that means it's completely funded. And then I just had a couple footnotes I wanted to point out to you. Or actually on page 9, which is the cash flow statement, your cash is in a very low position at the end of the year. And that was about 270,000 or 207,000 at the end of 25 in the Light and Power Fund. Most of what you have, about 10 million, is tied up in a very long-term investment. So that is set aside right now. And we don't want to touch that until the investment matures. So it was tied up very, very long-term many years ago. The other thing was page 36 in the footnotes, or no, page 20 in the footnotes, sorry. In capital, there's a pretty significant amount of construction in progress ongoing at the end of the year, and that is, the vast majority of that is on the Hall Street substation and the smart grid. The smart grid is really going to take off in this next year, I believe, because bonds were issued after year end, which is also disclosed in the financial statements on page 36. But subsequent to year end, 13.4 million in bonds were issued. That's the only other thing I was going to mention. There is a 2-page letter also issued that's primarily, I call it canned information. It discusses the audit a little bit, but we didn't have any significant management issues to bring forward there. One thing we did discuss with Carla and Brandy while we were out was regarding the inventory. Inventory is a pretty significant asset of the Light and Power Board, and it takes a lot of work to monitor that inventory. It's monitored by counts every so often, as well as test counts in between, and a year-end count, which we come up to observe. But we were suggesting and discussing with them that maybe a better perpetual system would be good to have implemented, and my understanding is that that's moving forward and being implemented, so I didn't put it in a management letter comment. So that was my report. If there's any questions I can answer, I'd be happy to.
Great. So we have a action to accept this audit, but first things first, any clarifying questions of the auditor? Any further comments from staff?
The only other comment I have is I just want to thank the city treasurer's office. It's a great collaboration between us and them to get this audit report completed. So I just want to thank Heidi Sheppy, Brian Postma, and John Robinson for
Great.
their help.
Glad to hear that. All right, would anybody like to make the motion?
I can make it. I move that the Light and Power Board accept the fiscal year end June 30th, 2025 audited financial statements.
Thank you.
Second?
Thank you, Alicia. Any further discussion? Okay. Any public comment? Bring it back to the board for vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the audit is accepted. Thank you for being here. Appreciate your
very
time and your
much.
help. All right, next item is the decarbonization framework policy. So Brandy's going to kick us off.
Yes, I'll kick us off, and then Colin Heights is actually going to walk us through. We have just some brief slides that pretty much just capture what's already in your packet, but just a little bit more visual conversational form. But before he gets going, I want to remind the board, and maybe it's just a matter of just a moment of acknowledgement, like this is probably a moment in time, a milestone moment for us, meaning that I feel like, in 2023, we did the Climate Action Plan, new modeling. After that, we updated our strategic mission and our vision, and then the next slide covers that strategic priority. And while there's been a lot of planning respects to our energy portfolio, our program planning, this is an opportunity that basically takes those strategic priorities and wraps it into how we're doing work. It is the policy that we're coming back to. To some extent, it's a no-brainer because the TCOP board had set a really amazing, audacious goal in 2018. However, I always say a strategy sometimes is as recent as the board we have before it. And so if there's an opportunity to ensure some legacy and longevity in terms of our planning and what we're doing, and basically in order for it to survive more than just a strategic plan, it's best to do a framework. And so we're going to walk through, or Colin's going to go through the framework or the governance piece that really is, quite frankly, it's more of also direction to me. But there's been many parts and a lot of things that have been on, I say, afoot over the past couple years, and hopefully most of this looks familiar and there shouldn't be any surprises. But it's always good just to see it come together. And so, Colin, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you to.
Thank you. So Brandy kind of already introduced it, but I'll just quickly touch on the purpose of the framework, and then we'll walk through the individual pieces of it a little bit more in depth as we go. So obviously, as Brandy was mentioning, the purpose here really is to establish a clear framework that informs our decisions, advancing the emissions reductions work that we're doing, provides strategic direction to inform those long-term decisions. It's really, as she was mentioning, a formalization of the guidance and the groundwork that the Climate Action Plan laid, and ensures that we have durable outcome-focused structures to follow as we move forward in our decarbonization plan. To ensure that decarbonization plan is a comprehensive one, the framework really follows three interconnected pillars. I'll touch on each of these a little bit more in depth in the next few slides, but those three pillars are power supply, which the commitment here is to transition to 100% clean energy by or before 2040, internal operations with a commitment to decarbonize TCLP's internal operations, fleet, and workforce practices, and then the community and end-use piece of it, which is a commitment to support the electrification of homes, businesses, and transportation in the city. On the power supply side, as I mentioned, that overarching goal is 100% clean energy by or before 2040, with an intermediate goal of 60% by or before 2035. One thing to call out specifically on the power supply side is that is based on the year of REC generation, not REC retirement, that we are tracking the progress towards that goal. In order to achieve that target, the framework lays out commitments to diversify the portfolio with renewables, energy storage, and demand response, which are all initiatives that you all are well aware we're actively undertaking. Also, we'll obviously continue to coordinate IRP scenarios with MPPA and MISO, and then in any scenarios possible, we'll be evaluating all potential funding sources, whether that be federal, state tax credits, grants, that sort of a thing, to ensure that power supply target of 100% clean energy is reached in the most affordable manner possible. As for the internal operations piece here, this is really the walk the walk kind of part of it. It's committing to being climate leaders by taking care of our house, essentially. So it's beyond the top level goal of ensuring that we electrify all fleet facilities and internal operations. It also has specific call-outs to ensure that we implement sustainable procurement practices with our new procurement administrator as a key piece of that, as well as embedding climate-related tools, resources, trainings for the workforce so that they can not only experience the benefits of this energy transition through their work, but also in their home and personal lives to ensure that they're brought along as well with the group. And then the final pillar is the community and end use piece. This is really, in my opinion, a very natural companion to the power supply pillar. In order to realize the full potential or the full impact of cleaning the power supply as a means of mitigating the effects of climate change, you also have to electrify the end use to ensure that the benefits of that clean grid are being taken advantage of to the highest degree possible. While the city of Traverse City doesn't have a dedicated, personalized greenhouse gas emissions inventory yet, we did leverage a lot of prior work by other similar communities throughout the state and the country at large to kind of inform where we would focus the efforts. And the key thing that you can take from pretty much any of those inventories that you take a look at from similar communities is that the vast majority of the community's emissions are going to come from a handful of places. Your building energy use and transportation essentially are the two primary factors. Just as a kind of note of how big of a scale that is, Ann Arbor's greenhouse gas inventory, they have it at 61% of their total emissions, and that excludes the University of Michigan, all of their operations. Flagstaff, Arizona, similar climate temperature-wise, just in commercial buildings, residential buildings, and transportation, they estimate 85% of their total emissions are coming from those handful of things. So leveraging that work done by other communities, it really helps to paint a clear, concise picture of what we need to focus the efforts on. So for this pillar, the commitments here are to support the electrification of heating systems, as that is the largest energy consumer in residential and commercial buildings generally, to advance customer adoption of technologies such as heat pumps, EVs, and then efficiency upgrades, especially as they pair with electrification upgrades. And then to ensure that we're doing all of this in an equitable way, ensuring that all members of the community get brought along early on in the transition. That is both a moral imperative to make sure, I think, that we are bringing the most vulnerable or low and moderate income or any of the other groups that we might be talking about there along, but it is also just a practical means of ensuring that the transition happens at the pace that it needs to happen at. And then finally, as is really well exemplified by the current or the recent time of use update, a key part of ensuring community and end use electrification can happen is ensuring that the rate structure allows that to be a thing that occurs and isn't a financial burden on the people that are electrifying. So a commitment here to ensure that we continue to align rate structures and incentives with the target to decarbonize and to electrify. Now, guiding us through each of those three pillars individually and this framework collectively are these 5 guiding principles. As I just touched on, the equity piece is both a moral imperative of ours as well as a practical tool that we need to ensure that we are bringing along every member of the community as early on in the process as we can to ensure that everyone's experiencing the benefits of electrification and decarbonization. Affordability and reliability have been and will continue to be central to any operational or strategic decision that the organization makes. Innovation, as I touched on in the second pillar, the internal electrification of TCLP operations, it is both important that we focus on innovation here because we want to be climate leaders and we want to make sure that we're on the front edge and that we are being a good example for other communities, but it's also just simply a practical thing that we need to do to ensure that we can hit these targets in the timeline that we're laying out. So it is both a lead by example as well as just a necessary tool that we need to make sure we're keeping our eyes on to stay apprised of any technological advances or innovation possibilities that we have in order to make sure that we approach our targets. And then finally, accountability. So ultimately, accurate measurement, reporting, and evaluation of these is both important for making sure that we're maintaining progress towards those targets as they, are 10, 15 years away, some of them. It's also important, obviously, for ensuring credibility and transparency in the community and making sure that we are maintaining that progress. And then finally here, the governance structure of the framework here. The board, you all, hopefully, will set the direction here through the adoption of this framework. Executive director then implements that operational and administrative policies consistent with the framework, and then the departmental leaders and staff members will develop supporting procedures and protocols to ensure progress towards and ultimate achievement of those targets. All right, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Wonderful presentation. Any questions or comments?
Just a clarification that the heating systems also include cooling,
Correct. Yep.
because that's the biggest load really in the summer for cooling. Just because a lot of people don't know that heating and cooling kind of are together.
Sure. And with the, as you know, the electrification that we are focusing on of the heating system would be heat pump focused, which would then provide the cooling in the same system.
Other questions?
Just to say thank you, that was well done.
Yep.
Thank you.
I can,
Did you have a question or?
no, I was going to just go ahead and then I'll second it.
Yeah, I appreciate this. Thank you. I have a question around, there was an asterisk on the screen around rec retirement. I think it might be helpful to clarify that for those who may not be familiar with the specifics there. It wasn't in the packet, so that would be helpful. And then the other thing I'm just curious about is like if you all considered some like hard numbers on any of the new goals. One thing that's so powerful about the renewable energy goal is that it's a very specific target. And I would love, I think this is a great starting place to jump off from, but I think as these plans develop, as we start to get baselines, it would be very helpful to say, we're gonna, achieve this percentage of electrification of these systems in Traverse City, or something that makes it very accountability as one of the pillars of the framework. So those are my two kind of questions and points.
Yeah, so let me, if you don't mind, let me respond to that. Let me add clarity, and not only clarity to the asterisk, the value of the asterisk. So the value of the asterisk is that we're not purchasing RECs just to accomplish a goal. The idea is that we want a generation attached to it. That's the value of that. When we talk, obviously there are RECs that TCOP has banked up. There is a science, there's a methodology for how they're retired, but in essence, the key piece here and the piece that we wanted to make certain is that we were only relying on RECs to meet state compliance goals. But really, I think the word that I think we've used before I got here was the concept of additionality, right? And was there even a debate on whether or not that's it? But that's the concept behind that. In terms of the additional administrative operational details and those numbers, those are exactly the pieces. And going to, I would say, if you go to the last slide, Colin, not that one, the one before that, sorry, the accountability piece. One of the things that I love about this particular framework, and which is a direction to me, is that what it does to me is it allows me to be able to build some really good metrics so that you are seeing those from an operational, obviously from a board perspective, but me from an operational perspective. Being able to measure success in terms of impact, not just necessarily to say, oh, we're electrifying a lot of stuff. We have a lot of renewables. What is the actual impact? So what I envision is very similar to the reports that I provide you right now. You'll start seeing some numbers on those, that I would have actually an operational benchmark target, as well as like how we're doing towards those. But we do have more, there's definitely more details. I will say each staff, not each staff, there is a staff lead for each of those like 3 core areas. As you can tell, Colin's probably closest to that last one, huh? But the power supply portfolio, it's no surprise, that's Carla. And Carla's working with a cross-functional team that's working on that. When it comes to our fleet, that's a combination of Tony as well as with Jake, the sustainability framework. So there is a lot of work that the team is pulling together. It's just before I go that extra step of providing those numbers, I want to make certain you're in alignment. Hopefully that kind of at least speaks to that.
Yep.
I appreciate that. I had the same question regarding just, KPIs. I saw a couple strong ones, and then I saw a couple, like, we're going to go to the gym this year and get better ones. And so I wanted to see some strong numbers, so I'm excited to see those come forward.
Yeah, and hopefully this is acceptable to you, but I hope you're okay with, my goal is that from a governance perspective, you're giving me direction with the high-level goals, and then I can put together what those operational metrics are.
Yes.
And being provided an update on what they are.
Yeah, I think even at the committee level, their staff did bring some ideas for some of the other elements or pillars. And the conversation we had was around, are you sure these are achievable? And what's an intermediate goal? And I think, my
Sure.
sense was that it'll take a little time to assess our community in a way that actually allows them to define realistic goals. But I think the staff was inclined to do so, and some of us kind of, are you sure this is realistic?
Yeah.
And then,
No, that's good. Maybe those things shouldn't be put into the overarching policy,
Right,
but
exactly.
rather, set later by yourself. I agree.
That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we'll, and at the committee level, we've gone into more detail at the committee level. But yeah,
Perfect.
which even include dates for EV transitioning
Love it.
and stuff like that. So
Great.
there's a lot afoot.
any other questions or a motion?
I can move that the Light and Power Board approve the TCLP Decarbonization Framework Board policy as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, well, I will just add one suggestion. It's really about how you present the information more than the substance of what's in here. Many times you say things about electrification in a way that will deliver good outcomes. That's great. In some cases, before you got to that point of reading the whole policy, it just says electrify. And I think it's good for our community to understand not all electrification is equally good. Efficient, flexible electrification. And at times, for some customers, it may have an incremental cost that may be well worth it for the environmental benefit. But just, I've seen other states struggle sometimes with unintentionally overstating the silver bullet nature of electrification and then having to retract. And better for us to be upfront and say, it's really good if. And just a couple times I saw just electrification is the only word. So the policy is great. Just the way you communicate going forward is a observation I had.
Good deal. We'll definitely do that.
Okay,
I have a comment as
Yeah.
well.
please.
I think this is fantastic directionally, and one thing I really like is the part that talks about leading by example, and it's like a buzzword that could be in the guiding principles, but I don't quite see it, which is just ambition. I think not only is the original 100% goal like exciting because it's a hard number, but it's also really ambitious. And when a few of us were on that board, like thinking we might not actually achieve this target. And when we're thinking about interim goals that are achievable, et cetera, like I just want to encourage this body and the newer folks here too, to not shy away from maybe over ambition in pursuit of these just really important goals.
Thank you for that. Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, framework policy passes. Nice job, staff. We are going to talk about the process for evaluation of the executive director.
Yes. So it's that time of year. The executive director performance review process will begin. For those of you that are new to the board, basically how it works is we seek the services of a facilitator. The facilitator works with a couple of the board members, volunteers, to come up with questions. And then throughout the remainder of the next 4 months, they come up with the questions, get a performance statement from Brandy. The entire board is given all of this information about the beginning of April. And then interviews are scheduled with each board member to discuss the interview questions with a facilitator. And then from there, we come back to the board in May. And then we may or may not go to closed session, have a discussion, and then finalize after that. So that's kind of the process. New this year, because the ad hoc actually put criteria into her contract. So basically, the ad hoc will not have to go and decide what potentially could be her raise. It's all set in there that if it's satisfactory, and right now, off the top of my head, I don't remember what that number is, but based on that, it doesn't have to come back to the board to say we would like to discuss her raise. It's already in that contract. So with that, for tonight, we need a couple volunteers to work with the facilitator on the interview questions. In the past, that has been the board chair and vice chair. So I will leave it up to you how you want to proceed.
Okay. So let me start with just the question of process, and whether it be for those of you who are new or for those who have been through the process, what you're hearing here is a suggestion to replicate what we've done in the past. And I want to make sure those who have been through the process in the past are good with that, or if you want to tweak it, suggest it. I see some thumbs up, that's good. And then for the folks who are newer, feel free to ask, but it is very customized in that you get a chance to interact with the evaluator directly, everything gets summed up, aggregated. It's very detailed, and there's a lot of room for your ability to have a conversation, not just, is she a 4 or 5 or 3, but rather some qualitative discussions as well. So it's, if anything, it's probably too thorough, but it's certainly thorough. And, but I wanted to give you all a chance to comment or question if you'd like to, just in the spirit of being bought in what we're doing here.
John and Paul, I think you guys will do a great job.
All right.
All right. Is that all right with that? Does everybody else want to stick with that past policy as well, or not policy, practice of the board chair and vice chair serving in this role? Okay. I think we're good. Have you talked to our facilitator
I have,
to
yes.
confirm?
So I'm waiting for a proposal from
Okay.
Kate. So
And for tonight, it's just to check in on the game plan, no action.
game plan, no action, just the 2 people that she would, work with
Okay.
questions and.
I'm good if you are.
Sounds great.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Great, thanks, board. Last item is the Grandview Parkway relocation closeout report.
All right, so just a reminder for everyone, this was in relation to the MDOT project where they rebuilt Grandview Parkway along the M22 corridor from Division Street northwest to the North City limits. We have some overhead electricity facilities along, basically between Bay Street and the Parkway, and along the intersection that is now a roundabout that were in the way for MDOT's plans. So we were able to, because it's in the city limits, we were able to get reimbursement from MDOT for most of the work costs. Some things weren't eligible, like engineering fees aren't eligible for reimbursement, and there was some material that we have stock that, because it was federally funded, had to meet Buy America requirements, which most of our material did, but there's a few items that did not, so we weren't able to bill for those. But overall, we were able to bill for the vast majority of the project. The project got off to a decent start, but there was some issues with coordination and shutting down M72 and that whole intersection that pushed the project from, that was initially supposed to start in the fall into the winter months. But we were able to kind of pivot, get the work done, and stay ahead of MDOT's construction schedule, so we didn't become any hindrance to them. But throughout the project, there were some changes and stuff that we had to do that actually increased the scope a little bit from the original project. And really some lessons learned, really kind of a follow-up to the Phase 1 project of just staying in contact with MDOT and kind of learned those lessons from the first project and stayed on top of things. And I think this one went a lot smoother, especially learning about, we had a lot of issues with light poles being in the way, and we were responsible for them in Phase 1. But in this phase, we actually had MDOT subcontract that out, and their contractor was responsible for moving the center line of the lights between Bay Street and Grandview Parkway, and then doing the lights around the roundabout, which worked a lot better. They have more flexibility and we're able to meet some of the immediate schedule demands of Elmer's, the contractor performing the work. And then with that, we were able to utilize almost for almost all the work, our internal workforce, which kind of goes back to one of our strategic alignments where we're trying to get our people meaningful work, and we were able to accomplish that and get the project done on time, and should be a very good area for us to have underground. Obviously, I'm sure everyone saw in the news, someone went through the roundabout and hit one of the light poles, but we don't have any poles there to hit, so that's the great news, is we won't have any outages caused by that. So
Okay.
if anyone has any questions or any follow-up on
Any
that.
questions on the closeout of this construction report? I just have one. In the budget table where you do the financial summary,
Yes.
it talked about the final revised cost estimate was 379, and we got from MDOT 365. But then the actual is actually over 400,000.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's the engineering analysis and the fact you had to do some materials that were not able to be purchased through American.
Yeah, and
Is
there
that-
was a slight scope adjustment after we did the final estimate, but MDOT was okay with the final billing, so we didn't actually have to go back to them and redo like the whole cost estimate and with the changes.
So I guess here's the question I have. In terms of your budgeting and predicting of this project, what percentage that you thought you'd get from MDOT of the project did you actually get? I know the whole thing costs more, so therefore we all paid a little more, and we got, they didn't make up for that delta, but
Sure.
did you get reimbursed the same percentage of the total cost you expected, is what I'm really asking.
I would say going into the project, yeah, it's maybe a little less than I would have liked, but it's really hard with MDOT's schedule because it's a lot of stuff that is very we were waiting on a contract, for instance, before we could start doing any work and order materials because we wanted it in writing, that their commitment to that, which kind of made it harder to get some of the materials that would have met Buy America requirements. But it's a state agency. It's kind of hard to work with them, and they're on a tight timeline getting in the construction season. So,
But close.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Anything else from the board? Okay, I think that report's concluded. Thank you. And I believe that's the end of our agenda. Unless there's anything else from staff today? And then anything from any of the board members?
Nice work, Tony. That was a
Yeah.
big project.
Yes, it was. All right, then we'll bring it back for one last chance for public comment. Seeing none, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all, and see some of you shortly.